Hi there, and welcome to another edition of Sports Scene right here on WLCS TV. Certainly glad to be back with you after a couple of weeks off. Of course, WLCS is part of the Lorain City School program. My guest this week technically isn't part of that program, but obviously many of the homes that receive WLCS are in the Clearview School District. And so my guest this week on Sports Scene is the head football coach of the Clearview Clippers, Tom Hoch. Of course, they finished up their season with a 7-3 record. And for one of the few rare occasions, Mr. Hoch and his football staff will not be heading to postseason play. So it certainly is a pleasure to have him here with us, and we'll talk about postseason and the Clearview year and high school football and high school sports in general. Tom, welcome to Sports Scene here on WLCS.
Thanks, Tim.
As we mentioned, one of the rare occasions that the Clearview Clippers haven't been in postseason play, in fact, second straight year, but before that it certainly got to be habit forming. But overall, your thoughts on this 1992 campaign that you just completed?
Well, we're pretty happy with the 7-3. A lot of teams would be upset with that or be excited about it. We have a few people that are a little bit upset, but we were young going in, and we're happy with 7-3. And a play or two either way, and we become 8-2 and get into playoffs.
Coach, any particular point where your club turned the corner? I know when you spoke to me at the beginning of the year, you mentioned then that you were a young football team. Any point or any game that you thought this team has turned the corner and really made some strides? Well,
I thought early in the year, we went second game, we traveled another part of the state and played Tuscarawas, and I thought, well, we were really growing up. And then we come back and lost a heartbreaker to Lorain Catholic, and then Wellington took it to us pretty good. And I think the following week against Brookside, we blocked the field goal to win the ball game. And from there on, we played pretty solid. Even in our loss to Elyria West, we played solid football the rest of the year.
Coach, let's talk about some of your players that really came on for you this year. I know it was altogether basically a different group than what you played in 1991. Who are some of the guys that really shined for Clearview this year?
I think we have to start the offensive line. We put a lot of points on the board this year. Our defense wasn't as strong as it's been, but we put about 230 points on the board. So our two tackles, Charlie Nutt and Jason Pollock, our two guards, Ronnie Justice and Brian Newman, really led us very strongly there. Our center, T. Taylor, and we alternated Sam Trauber. So that's where it really developed. And then our skill people really came on for us. Mark Viet at quarterback threw for over 1,000 yards this year, and that's very unusual for people who know Clearview football. And our two wide receivers, Andy Sakic, he had 21 receptions this year, and Dwayne Todd, a phenomenal year. He had 46 receptions for almost 800 yards. So that was we threw the ball a lot more, and we got solid running out of our 4 or 5 backs we alternated. Rodney Hammond had 700 yards, and Michael Green, Michael Tower each scored 4 or 5 touchdowns. So didn't have that big back this year, but we used a lot in the backfield, and then threw the ball a lot more.
Tom, talk a bit about the thought process as a head coach when you're putting together an offense. Do you, I know for years on the defensive side of the ball, you and Marv have gone with the 4-4. Offensively, do you look at your talent and build your offense around there, or do you pretty much take the same scheme and try to fit the players into that? What was your thought this year?
I think it's an age-old question. Do you fit your program to the players, or vice versa? And what we did this year is we went in with the same basic scheme we've had every year since I've been there, but we found out we could do a few more things, and we didn't throw everything out and start something new. We incorporated some of the ideas, and we just put a lot of passing off our running that we do so much of, and we had a lot of play action. So we feel we incorporated. We didn't go out and say, hey, we're going to pass the ball this year, we're going to throw the ball. We took our basic offensive philosophy, incorporated the passing game within that philosophy.
Obviously, when you've got a guy like Dwayne Todd, a big receiver that you can get the ball to, and an athletic receiver at that, it certainly makes your options that much more viable.
Oh, absolutely. And he had a lot of help there because we had a nice 6'5" receiver on the other side with Sakic. Ted Atkins came in a lot of times and caught us some short passes. We threw to our backs out of the backfield, and this was a little bit, as I say, different within the offensive scheme. So the skill people did real well for us.
Defensively, as I mentioned, the 4-4 that you and Marv have been with for so many years, some standout players on that side of the ball.
I think that's the one side of the ball that I'm a little disappointed. I haven't been for years. We just weren't aggressive in getting to the football. We didn't play real well there. Our two outside ends did a good job for us this year, Matt Stevenson and Andy Sakic. And Dwayne had a great year in the secondary, along with Michael Green. Mike has 5 interceptions, Dwayne had 7. And our linebackers, which were young, that's the one good thing. Our linebackers will be coming back. We have Chad Parsons, who's a sophomore, started in there, and Tony Ambrose at junior started the other linebacker.
Coach, as we tape this show, the game hasn't taken place yet between Amherst and Elyria West, but as the folks watch it at home, the contest will have already been played. But I want to get your thoughts on the Elyria West Wolverines, probably one of the more dominant football teams that Lorain County has seen in quite some time. Where would you rank them with teams that you've been associated with and competed against?
They remind me somewhat of some of the old Elyria Catholic teams. And what makes them go, the key is they got a nice line this year, and they're not making any mistakes. So I definitely have to compare them to Elyria Catholic, some old Midview teams, go back to the Lakeland, Vermilion teams, some old Amherst teams, because they do so many things so well. So those are the ones that really stand out in my mind.
Do you think they can go quite a ways in the playoffs? And again, keeping in mind, as we tape this, they haven't even played their first game yet.
Yeah, they have the ability this year because they are deep, and I keep referring to it, but their line, they can come at you with 5 or 6 backs. They got great skilled kids, and they're both quick and physical.
Tom, there was an article in the paper last week with you and Kermit Rowe discussing the evolution of football here in Lorain County and in the state of Ohio, actually, with the extended divisions, now that more teams then can get in. But do you see the power in Lorain County evolving, that there are more and more teams that have the ability to go to the playoffs in advance?
Well, I think when I think back on that, I think there's a lot of teams that have been quality teams that haven't made the playoffs. I don't think it's that all of a sudden this year, bing, there's a new power structure developing. Vermilion could probably line up and go every year. Midview last year had a nice ball club. West, when they were 8-2, could go out and play with teams. I can go on and on and on. Amherst, Elyria Catholic every year. These aren't new powers. They've had some fine football before. This year, with the combination of their independence, winning their conference, the 5 divisions now, it's given them a chance. So I really don't see it as being somebody new on the horizon. These teams have been good before.
As someone that is very involved and very active in the Ohio football coaches, do you like the extended divisions where they've expanded it out?
Yeah, the biggest complaint that you're going to get is from administrators because they feel the season is too long. That's not our purpose at all, extending the season. We have no aspirations whatsoever of doing that. What we want to do is give people a second chance. I mean, every sport has its own entity and it's different, but I'll say it again, a basketball team could go 2-16, 2-18, they get that second shot.
Right.
Football, we're only using 80 schools, and we'd like to, somewhere down the line, go to 6 divisions. That is going to be one of our proposals that we're going to be working on, just to give us a chance. Don't want to extend the season, keep the same format, let's get more people involved. A couple of the fringe teams there that
right.
can't get in, or teams that have been 9-1 and that type of thing, or 10-0, and you're always going to have some. But we want to extend that, get more involved.
I'll play devil's advocate, though. The people that are against that will say when you expand the divisions, it dilutes it a little bit. Your response?
Well, I don't think it does, because, again, right now a lot of teams are crossed over. For instance, a 4 going to play a 2 right now, or vice versa. There's lots of good football teams out there, more than just the 80 that are in it. You could make yourself a very, very, very solid, nice schedule with anybody in your division, just your division,
right.
that didn't even make the playoffs. And you put together a winning, every team you could play would be a winning team, and they didn't even make the playoffs within your own division, your own region, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, you would like to keep the format the same, though, as far as the computer points are concerned.
Right now, and that's tossed up every year. Somebody comes to the drawing board with a new plan, and there's been talk as much as, let's play 6 games and everybody's in the tournament like Indiana has. Indiana only has 200 schools. It's a little more feasible at doing it. We have 720 football playing schools. Somebody came in with a new point structure. When you look at from head to toe, this is probably the best way to go right now.
And yet there are teams such as your club last year, went 9-1, was a dominant football team, stubbed the toe against Elyria West, which, took that win and just put it into a snowball effect right into this year. But there's always a team or two that should be in there that isn't, and there's no way of solving that problem.
Right, and again, it's based on the schedule and then the people they beat. A lot of people lose track of, well, who did those teams beat? You look at, well, that team's in there at 6-4, and maybe they played 10 very tough football clubs, and that's the kind of thing you keep in mind. I think it makes you schedule a little bit tougher, that type of thing, or go out and schedule some tougher teams.
Well, that gets into your job as athletic director over at Clearview, where you're trying to put together a schedule for your football team, and I imagine it's a juggling act for you as both AD and football coach. You want to get a competitive schedule, and yet you don't want to put your guys up against murderer's row either.
Yeah, that's the one thing. You don't want to play 10 tough games. It won't do you any good. You've got to try and get yourself a schedule that's conducive and that can get you some points. Fortunately, we're in a league. The teams that have a hard time are teams that are not in a league. Your independents have a very difficult time because they're going to get one of two things: nobody or everybody. Right. Your murderer's row.
You're in a league, though, where it actually helps you. I mean, Elyria West is a 2. Brookside is a 2.
3, I believe.
A 3.
No, they're 2. You're right.
But you're playing schools that are bigger than you, so you're going to pick up some points with those victories.
Well, if you can beat them, but that's the one, and I think I've talked to you before about it, that's the one little X factor a lot of people don't realize. That is true, but by the same token, Elyria West got a bundle of points off of us because we go out and schedule some bigger teams, we beat some bigger teams, and it can play to your advantage. A lot of people lose track of that because, say we're Division 4, and I schedule 4 Division 2s. If I beat those 4 Division 2s and the 5th Division 2 beats me, they're going to get all those points. So it does work both ways. I'm taking a chance scheduling the bigger ones, but the bigger school says, oh, we don't want to play a littler school. Some of the bigger schools ought to look at the schedule that some of the littler schools play, because it can definitely work to their advantage. We handed, after Elyria West beat us, I mean, they jumped up bundles of points.
Right.
And it's because of the people we played and people we beat.
The Lorain County Conference this year, people have said it was a down year for the conference, aside from Elyria West, with the way they just rolled over everybody. Was Elyria West so good that they made everybody not look to be quite the caliber of football team that they could have been or were?
I think that's it exactly. You go back and look at the conference, it was balanced week in, week out. Take Elyria West out because they are above and beyond everybody else. You got a lot of competitive games. You can go back and look at it. Brookside was up and coming. Oberlin's up and coming. Avon's always solid. Ourselves. Wellington had a little bit above this year, but you look at the scores and week in, week out, and it was a competitive conference. It's one of those years that, and West is due their credit, they guys have a dominant football team in all aspects.
Tom, it seems as though schools, will rise for a few years and then flatten off, and then maybe go down, then rise again. How have you at Clearview been able to keep that level of success at such a high level over so many years?
Basically, it's been 2 things. Number one, the kids have to have a desire, because I remember hearing this when I was a kid and first started coaching. It's a lot easier to get there than stay there, and that's true. And I have to talk every week, or anybody I talk to, about, boy, everybody is out to get you. I mean, it's almost a mental impossibility to get them up every week. That's what we work on, the mental aspect, and our coaching staff has stayed in track for so long. We know what we're doing. The guys work together real well. They've been, my assistant coaches have been great. I mean, they pretty much run the whole show anymore. I'm almost just a custodian anymore. Let them run the show. I sweep the floors and they take care of everything else.
Yeah, you've told the story already about Marv Hoagland and his one shot at offensive coordinator came up with the game-winning touchdown against Oberlin.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And he's a great defensive coordinator for years and years and years, and he pretty much runs the whole show. And it was getting to the end of the ball game, and our 8th game of the year, and we were 4th and 7, and I wasn't 100% sure what to do. And I looked and I asked Marvin, "You got any ideas?" He says, and it wasn't just an off-the-cuff comment. He says, "Yeah, I want to do this." Caught me a little bit by shock, and then we ran the play, and not only got us a first down, got us a touchdown. So I go in the meeting next week, and I handed Marv the whole offensive packet and said, "Here you go. You're now the offensive coordinator."
Coach, I want to get back into the playoff scenario because we've talked about Elyria West, and there are a couple other Lorain County teams that are in there as well, though they're not in your conference. But Amherst, Vermilion, Elyria Catholic, these are just teams, and I know you know the coaches very well, that year in and year out just seem to be at the top of the heap.
Well, I think it goes back again. Larry and his staff do a great job of technique, getting the kids mentally ready, and he goes out and he's not going to make any mistakes. Amherst has done a nice job of that. They want to take it to you right up front. I go back to the old Lakeland Conference when we used to play Amherst 7, 8 years ago, and they just got a nice philosophy. They got a nice program, 7 through 12, and that's what does it. Larry's got a good staff. Ralph over at Vermilion, we used to have some knockdown drag-out battles with Ralph when he and the Vermilion Sailor football team. Good coaching again. The kids that desire that want to play football, they're going to buckle them up every week and they're going to come right at you. And the tradition at Elyria Catholic, that just keeps going. Dave got in there as the head coach this year, and he just picked it right up and kept it going. Didn't slow down a lick. And he brings a lot of tradition, and he's been around to see a couple other areas, so he uses what he has seen plus the kids and his expertise of being on the other side that can feed. And it's a mental thing anymore, really. It's really a mental game. You got to work hard at getting physically ready in the off season. But during the year, it's the X's and O's to a degree, but the kid has to be mentally ready.
Coach, I know you know the coaches here in the Lorain City School System as well. Terry King, Tom El Cisco, and Ollie Glass, who took over for John halfway through the season. You got to have a lot of empathy with what those guys went through, well, obviously last year with not even having football, but then trying to put all the pieces back together again this year. Yeah,
if I was to vote, usually when you vote for a Coach of the Year, it'll be somebody that's won or been successful, got to the playoffs, and it's most deserving. I think those three guys all deserve a vote to take a program, pull it back together. In essence, you're starting at scratch. And I know last year, Coach El Cisco, he just continued to think football. His staff was a very dedicated staff over there. Coach King, just outstanding. And all three schools are to be commended to be able to pull it back. Record very deceiving this year because, in essence, they're starting as a new school, and now they'll have to build on this.
We had the Lorain-Elyria game on WEOL, the final game of the year, and to watch those two teams go back and forth as they did all night long, you never would have thought that the Lorain High Steelmen hadn't played football in 1991. I mean, they gave the Pioneers everything they could handle. And I know Terry King and Tom El Cisco and the people over at Southview are looking forward to '93 already. They just basically took this year and used it as a building block.
And I think they went in with that mindset. They knew that it was going to be difficult. They kept within their scheme. They kept within their patience. I didn't see Lorain High play this year, but I watched their scores and that type of thing, and they improved every week. I heard them on the radio a couple of times, and that was an improving ball club every week. You could sense it. You could tell it. The kids didn't quit. That's a big thing. But when you're 1 or 2 games, and none of the kids that any of the coaches had were quitting. They just kept plugging away. Good building block for next year for the Lorain schools.
Absolutely. You've been around a long time. What keeps it enjoyable for you? What keeps you coming back every July and August for conditioning and 2-a-days? And for some coaches, it gets to be a real grind. I've talked to a lot of guys in the area that say, it really gets to be old after a while. But you've been going at it a long time.
I felt that way a couple of years ago. I really was very, very close to say, I'm going to sit back and let somebody else do it. And then our 10-0 team made it fun. It was just fun again. And I think that if I had to pinpoint one thing, it's just being around the kids. I mean, if I look at everything else, it's just being there with the kids. The players, there's always something new every day. It's like teaching. There's always something new that's going to occur every day.
How have the kids changed over the years?
I think that probably the biggest thing is a lot more outside influences, be it something on the street, as unfortunate as our society is, they want to work and get a car. That's almost mandatory. When you're a senior, maybe you got a car. Sophomores are talking about, hey, I got to have a car, that type of thing. I think the outside influences are the biggest things where the kids have changed. Then you're going to get some kids that are just as dedicated as they were back in the 50s, and they get in the weight room, they want to excel and that type of thing. So Overall, again, being a little repetitive, it's probably outside influences on the kids.
Has that affected your coaching philosophy and your style in dealing with young men today differently than you did 10, 15 years ago?
I think probably the one area would be you have to be more of a counselor now, and a lot of coaches would probably tell you that. Getting out there and crawling through the dirt for 3 hours and screaming, you have to do that to a point, but those days are gone. You have to be a counselor. You have, again, as a microcosm of our society, there's so many different problems. You don't know what you don't know if your starting quarterback got up and had a meal all day long. You don't know if there was problems within a family of somebody. And a lot of people sitting there on a Friday night, I don't care what school you're at, all they want to see is a W. Don't realize that a coach is with these kids all day long in the building, all summer long, all year long, and they have personal problems and feelings just like people sitting in the stands do.
Right.
That's the biggest change and the basic way that we've had to change.
Is that the biggest misconception amongst the parents?
Probably, or just a fan. I find that as the biggest misconception, that I'm talking strictly high school ball.
Right.
The fan tries to draw a parallel with pro football. These kids aren't being paid.
Right.
They've got to come out. They've got to get their grades. They've got other activities. They got a family situation, whatever it may be. And they go out on Friday night. There's no $1 million checks for these kids. They're out there because they love to play football. And I think the fan gets caught up in that sometimes just a little bit too much with your different booster organizations, your rabid fans, this type of thing. I don't think it's going to change because it gives an adult some kind of an outlet on a Friday night. He's up there, he's worked all day, and see his team win or lose, and he gets fired up. But it's a lot different that those kids down there have personal problems. We're not working 7 days a week watching film for 6 hours like the Browns or something.
The fact that we're now in the playoffs, do you become a fan? Can you put yourself away from a football game? I know you mentioned before we rolled the tape that you're going to go out and see a couple of games and see some other teams play. As a guy sitting in the stands, are you constantly dissecting the game as a coach, or you just sit back and have a hot dog and a soda and watch the game?
My wife and my coaching staff sometimes can't believe. I love going out watching another football game. It's like a mailman taking a walk on an off day. I'll go out and watch I'll go watch a football game. I do very little critiquing as it goes on. I might pick up something that I like and might use it, but I really sit back and I watch the excitement of everything going on within the playoffs or a big game or what have you. I like to just sit back once in a while as a fan and watch it.
Who's going to go a ways? I'll put you on the spot here. Again, as we roll it, the playoffs haven't even begun, but some teams around even our area or the state that you think are going to be wearing the crown.
Well, I like West, and the biggest reason is because, one, I've played them in our conference, but I do like their overall team speed and their ability. I like Elyria Catholic on their tradition. I mean, Dave's got them rolling over there right now. I mean, you go in there and you knock off the last couple teams he did. They look like they've grown each week. If Vermilion gets by Fostoria, it'll be very interesting. I think that Vermilion and Coach Mayer can line up and play with those people. Looking at a couple other parts of the state, you got your traditional powers in a Division V. It's Newark Catholic again, probably. Yep. Warren Kennedy and another. I've watched them last year, and I did go to the finals last year and watch most of the teams. And a lot of teams are repeat teams that are going into these final 80. And I would guess that probably 5 or 6 of them will show up in the finals in Massillon in a few weeks again, the same ones. But I think that our region and our county is very, very, very well represented this year, and they can go. They've all got the ability. Any one of the teams. Amherst, with their discipline and their ability, they knock off West. They got a chance to go.
You look at that Division II region. You got the Lorain County Conference, the Southwestern Conference, the Erie Shore Conference, all represented, and then of course you have an independent in Elyria Catholic. So everybody's in there from the Lorain County area. It really is amazing. Yeah,
that's what makes it nice, and that's what I was talking about earlier in the program. This isn't all of a sudden, poof, we've got a new power up here. These teams have always been good.
Right.
I mean, year in, year out, the teams that are in it this year are good football teams that could have been in years past that just didn't fall because of their independent schedule or whoever they beat didn't win. These teams don't surprise me being in it. They're good representatives.
Tom, we've only got a minute or two left. Two final quick questions for you. Good things on the horizon for the Clearview Clippers? You're going to have continued success over there?
Well, we're pretty solid. Our junior high and freshman hasn't been dominating, but they're solid. And we got a lot of nice kids coming back, a lot of good players coming back from this year's team. So we think we can be very competitive again next year.
And the final question, you mentioned that a couple of years ago you were teetering a little bit. Coach Hoch back on the sidelines in '93?
Yeah, I'm planning on going for the gusto again next year. So.
I'm glad to hear it. I'll tell you what, you're a class act and outstanding coach. Your success at Clearview certainly speaks for itself, but has to feel a little strange sitting here watching the playoffs. Hope to have you back there next year.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'd like to be back in it again.
We'll see what we can do, right?
Right.
Tom, many thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
My guest on Sports Scene has been Tom Hoch, the head coach of the Clearview Clippers, and of course, as I said earlier, the success over there certainly speaks for itself. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week on Sports Scene right here on WLCS TV. So long, everybody.
WLCS TV 36, Lorraine City Schools.